Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Emax TinyHawk NanoScout Pro. This particular version is the HD0 version, so you do need HD0 goggles like the V2s or V1s like this. There's also box goggles, and Emax has their own box version of HD0 goggles. This does come in an analog version as well. And oftentimes these kind of get pigeonholed as beginner sort of whoops, and that kind of makes them sound negative, but I think of it as durable, or you might even say reliable sort of whoops, because when you go with the high performance whoops, sometimes we have to repair. Hopefully it's just a breakage of the frame. Other times we have more serious repairs that cost us money. But this is designed, in my opinion, around someone, whether you're an intermediate, expert, or beginner, that wants a whoop that is probably not going to fly as fast or as long as counterparts in the high performance area, but it's got plenty of protection for all the components, and it's going to live up to many, many crashes and be there for you time and time again. The motors are 0702 27,000 kV ball bearing motors, and on those motors are Emax's own Avia prop. It's a 31 millimeter prop. Of course, because I have the HD0 one, we see the DiviMath chip down there. This is an HD0 all-in-one board, which has a VTX that goes up to 200 milliwatts. And it has the HD0 Eco camera on it. We do have motor connectors, as well as a micro USB, and to hold your battery with just a rubber band, but I didn't find any spares in the package. But it will come with one battery. It's a 320 milliamp Emax battery, and it's Emax because it uses the EM20 connector, which is not compatible with any other connectors that we use on the market. So long term, you might want to make a little adapter for other batteries, depending upon how you find the use of that connector and availability of batteries. It does come with a USB charger. The lights are solid on when they are charging, and they go off when you're done charging, and if they're not in use, they flash. I lied. I found the accessory kit, and it did have one more rubber band and an itsy bitsy screwdriver. Extra set of props, various cards for information and warnings, and one sheet of stickers. And it does come in a carry case. It really doesn't have a handle. It's just got this little strappy thingy. It weighs 22.78 grams on my scale, and with that 320 milliamp battery, it weighs 31.62 grams. Just like a traditional whoop, it comes in at 65 millimeters. I'm going to start off with inside flight, which is my favorite sort of flight. As if you're not familiar with HD0, it is a different video system than analog, although the HD0 goggles natively do both. Well, I should say the V2s and the box goggle Pros, Pro Plus, those do analog as well as HD0. The V1 HD0 goggles, you had to have an add-on module and that little adapter. Emax, as I mentioned, also has their transporter, I think, line that does HD0, but I can't remember. I don't think it does both analog and HD0. I think it's HD0 only. The upside to HD0 is you do get a better image than you do with analog. Downside is the HD0 version is going to consume more power for just the video performance, as well as weigh a little bit more than the analog counterpart. So if flight time is your priority and you're looking at this or something like this, analog is going to be your priority because that will get you the additional flight time because of the lower weight, lower power consumption. But you won't get the visual clarity that you might get from a camera such as this. I do wish it had the Lux camera on it rather than the Eco. This looks good, don't get me wrong, but I just like the Lux camera a little bit more. The problem with the Lux camera is that it does not have a screw mount on the side, so that means your mount has a static camera angle. But in this case, because we do have screw mount, and Emax did use their plastic mount, which I have broken in the past, but that's been their last iteration or so. They've changed that a few times now. I have found that I broke that, but not in this particular case. With most whoops, what you tend to find is a lot of the weight comes out of the frame, and therefore the frame tends to flex more. It also tends to be a little less likely to take as many hits over the course of time. But with something like this that's going to weigh more in the frame, you should find, one, your props get damaged less, your motor stems get damaged less, as well as your all-in-one. But the one thing that still could potentially get damaged just as much as any other whoop is the camera, because it still sticks out front. Our flight, as you see, only lasted 2 minutes with my particular flight speed and style, but it did nail the ending voltage at 3.5 volts after disarming. If you follow the channel closely, you know I like to do both full flights, and I like to do them inside and outside regardless of the particular quad. So we're going for an outside flight, almost no wind at all. I think the wind reading, according to my notes, said 4 to 6 miles an hour, but I also wrote down in my daily log notes when I go out for different flight sessions, you know, anything that hits me, that I couldn't feel it. I was cooking. It was hot. I think it was like 97 degrees and without any breeze sitting back there. Thankfully, I don't think I'm directly in the sunlight. I just wrote hot, hot, hot on my notes. But this, I think, is evening time. You can see the sun's a little bit lower, probably after work on a typical weekday. But when you're outside, you're kind of stretching your whoop legs. That's where you tend to maybe be able to get longer runs, so you can have a longer flight time because you're not so hard on the throttle necessarily. But if you start to do tricks and maneuvers, which this is capable of all the stuff that I tend to do, then yeah, you're still going to be hitting the battery kind of hard. I do my power loops, I do my punch outs and my dives, I do the slalom or figure eight stuff, I do my pod racing pass by the fence. I love doing that. Get down kind of on the downside of that berm, that drainage berm that we had built a few years ago to keep water out of the yard we are on the lower side of the neighborhood. Little punch over the cabana or outdoor living space cook area. It can do it all, and it can take a crash, and you get nice camera quality with the HD0. Almost crashed there into that tree, but I avoid. We are going to look at a slower indoor flight to just kind of compare flight time for those of you that might be wondering about the impact of flight speed or flight style, and that has. It's about 20 seconds is what I'll find. I'll go ahead and spoil it. We will take a look and doing a comparison between this particular whoop, which is based upon reliability, durability, versus something that is more around performance and racing and going fast, or just overall more of a top-end sort of performer or flyer in the whoop category. So if you're not familiar, it'll be easy to show that. It won't take much time at all, but you can see my camera set up on the table right next to me. That is how I bring in flight audio into my videos. But the flight ended. I did run the battery down a little bit. I got 205, but the battery is a little bit lower than I want it. And this is that slower flight inside that I did mention that I was going to do the comparison in flight time and how just slowing down. And you can see I've brought the camera angle down quite a bit. We can see the two front whoops or ducts, prop protection, what have you, whatever name you want to use. We have that in view. And to some degree, I know this might be peculiar to some people, but I kind of like seeing those in the view. But oftentimes, because of the camera angle that I like to fly at, and I've kind of just been flying at that camera angle for so many years, I can't see those. This kind of, it brought a smile to my face doing this particular testing. It took me a few flights to get the battery voltage even reasonable, because oftentimes there's a real fine line on these Emax batteries where you start getting them down to where you get the low voltage warning, and then you can still have a few seconds of flight time before you need to actually come into land. At least, for me, I'm trying to time it to where I disarm and I get right at 3.5 volts on my cell, like I do across most videos. It's per cell on the voltage. But these batteries seem to fall off pretty quick once you get much below that voltage where you start to get your warning. So I ended up getting below that quite a bit, and especially because I was bouncing around from inside to outside of my flights during different days, then I would start to tweak my battery voltage for an outside flight, and then I'd need to change it for an inside flight. So I kept changing it back and forth, and eventually, after like the fourth or fifth day, I was like, all right, I'm going to get a happy medium here on an inside flight, and I'll just have to be mindful that I set my voltage warning for an inside flight, not for an outside flight. So if I do a big punch out after I've gotten a little bit of a minor reminder about the low voltage warning, then I might be putting myself in trouble as far as getting the battery voltage too low as far as what I like to show in the videos. Because I think landing and disarming, letting the battery recover for a few moments, if it gets back to 3.5 volts, that's about where I want to be. Some people prefer to land at storage voltage, which is 3.8 or 3.85, depending upon your premise. I have never really done that. I think the Whoop batteries that we go through, it's pretty traditional. If you get a couple hundred cycles on well, that might be overshooting it a bit. If you get, say, 150 cycles on a Whoop battery, it's probably going to be one of those batteries that doesn't have the flight time that your fresher packs might get. So you do tend to cycle through Whoop batteries. But I got the voltage relatively close at 3.43 volts. 4.4 there a little bit, but flight time 20 seconds more. So we talked about doing a comparison between something that's more high performance. This is the Newbie Jones Race Spec V2. It's pretty easy. I mean, at a glance, you can see we have all sorts of canopy that helps also to create some rigidity within the frame, versus this is cut just, a TPU print, which, keeps things light. That's for performance. You always want to drive the weight way as far down as you can. You can also see just from the thickness of the plastic around the Whoop ducts and the number of ducts, and the ducts themselves and the frame itself, that there's just a lot more plastic within this. And that's where the weight comes from, and that decreases your flight time when you're towing more weight, just like with anything. You don't have a larger gas tank, but if you are interested in the absolute longest whoop flight time and a traditional 75mm whoop, you can get batteries from Weebleed FPV that are 465 milliamp hours, I think. They're really long. Oh, just let me fetch one. All right, so it took me a second, but I found my packs here, and see, look how long that is. Oh, 465, I was right. But they're very, very long, and of course, I don't think they come in anything other than BT20. So in this case, it's not directly compatible. You can't plug those in. You would need an adapter like this, which I made myself. I don't think you can buy these anywhere, or you need to cut this off and put on BT20. But this is a super long battery. You get it slid in here. And this is the best way I know in order to increase your fuel tank size for traditional whoops, because it will fit in these trays. And it's almost like you've got a spear here out the end. I'll link these down below if you're interested. But this is, as far as I know, the best way of getting a traditional tiny whoop and having the most battery or fuel tank for your long flights on these. Of course, Weebleed FPV is US centric, but if you live outside the US, you know, they might ship. I'm sure they'll ship to you, but what the cost is, it's always a big consideration when it comes to the. But you could have tiny whoop wars or whoop wars with these long old batteries. I will say that if you have your camera angle way down like I kind of do, I would suspect you might see the end of this battery in your camera view. And if you have it flat, you probably will really see that. So that might be a fun thing. Some whoop battery wars out there. But also another area where, to get back to where they do performance, I mean, just look in the size and the height of these ducts. They're dramatically different. Not just the plastic thickness, but also the height wherever you have it around the frame. You just cut a lot of weight down in the frame. And then you look at even the distance or the amount of material around the motors. It's always minimal in a race or high performance sort of whoop, versus something like this is going to be, you know, much more robust. It's going to have more thickness built into the frame, which is good if you're crashing a lot, because sometimes some of these all-in-one boards can be sensitive to getting bent. You know, you could have a trace on the board that, you know, once the board gets warm and it has a violent crash, you might be breaking a trace on the board. Oftentimes on all-in-one flight controllers, what we see is ESC3 gets burned out. Maybe this somehow helps with that. I haven't had any problems, of course, with mine or with race specs. Really, when it comes to most of my more modern whoops, I haven't had that issue, and I've been running. I fly a whoop every day before I go to bed if I'm feeling normally. So I fly whoops all the time. I just haven't had that problem. But I've read about people having a lot of ESC3 issues. But other all-in-ones, they'll die for various reasons, and it could be because we're snapping the boards because we've got such high performance. That's a theory, but I think that's a working theory in this particular case, where you have a bigger canopy that's going to provide some rigidity in your frame, and you have more overall frame that's going to decrease the amount of force it gets down into your all-in-one. But on the other side, it's heavier, so the impact forces should be greater if they were flying at the same speed. Okay? Hopefully that's a lot of words to say this is made for durability and this is made for low weight, high performance. So that's the Emax TinyHawk NanoScout Pro. This is the HD0 version. I suspect this version is going to be a little bit more expensive than the analog version as well. And I will link these Weebleed batteries. I know it doesn't work natively with this quad because it's got the EM20. This is BT20. They're not compatible. But because I mentioned it, and it's the only place I've ever seen a traditional tiny whoop or whoop battery, you know, it fits in our battery trays, that has this size, 465 milliamp hours of juice inside. I'll go ahead and link it for anyone else who might be interested down below. And I'll also link the TinyHawk NanoScout Pro down in the video description. The analog version, as far as pricing, $129, seems about where it should be. People have been asking me a lot about a high performance whoop coming out. It's still coming. Unfortunately, at this time, the word I can tell you is it sounds like 3, maybe 2 weeks still. And the first batch is going to be small and limited because the chip shortage kind of really hit that one hard. but it's coming. I promise. I'm sorry that I created such a stir about that. But this, the analog version of this is 129. If I go over to the HD0 version at 269, so it goes way up. I do suspect this will also be included in their kit, the NanoScout kit, where they'll probably be replacing the previous iteration. So you'll find this with goggles and a radio as well. If I find that on the Emax website, I'll link it, or link it with some other site that I might find it as well. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about the TinyHawk NanoScout Pro HD0 version, or I could probably answer some questions about the analog version as well, please let me know in the comment section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.